So I get a lot of people asking, what bit should I use for my horse? Or, you know, what bit works best in a certain situation? And really, you know, that's a custom answer. There's never just one size fits all for horses in terms of bitting, that's for sure. And if people say there is, then, you know, might be a little bit of a red flag. But as a general rule of thumb, for teaching a horse any maneuver that they will ever learn to perform, you'd want to use a snaffle bit. I mean, so if you want an easy answer, snaffle bit. It can get much more complex than that, and as you progress through the series of bits, then you can play around with these ideas a little bit more. But snaffle bit is the best answer I can give for most people. But that being said, let's go talk a little bit about bits and talk about the progression that a horse goes through, because snaffle bit may be the right answer, but you could need to go to the step before that or the step after. So since humans have started riding horses, horses have gone through this structure of tools that we have created to communicate with them. And the first tool, let me grab it. The first tool you would ever use to ride your horse with is a halter. In Spanish, the word hakima means hackamore, and that's what a lot of the Western riders and the Western horsemen tend to want to use for their first rides. But hakima in Spanish also means halter. So if you do the groundwork correctly and you get your horse responding to nose pressure and his feet are educated to those sensations, why would then you throw the whole script out and try and do a first ride in a snaffle bit when he already knows how to respond to the hackamore or the halter? You know, my old buddy Andy, he would say a hackamore is a glorified halter or a bosel. But so this is a hackamore, or this is the halter. The hackamore, the halter, is always the first step with your horse. Just for fun skis, here's another bosel, and here's a little bit of a bigger black one, and it's got the Makati reins on there. You can see, but so typically what you want to do is start with, say, you want to start with a nice, fat, soft hackamore. You see how this is really flexible, and it has a really nice big noseband. Well, I mean, that's like the same thing as if you get one of those clinic style halters, right? So, you know, save yourself a couple bucks at first, and you don't need to go right out and break the bank and get some fancy rawhide. Use a piece of rope and get your horse working right first, and make him worthy of something that could wear a hackamore or a nose piece like that and look good. So, halter and hackamore, always the first step. Second step is you transfer that knowledge to the snaffle bit. The snaffle bit is for directional control and to be able to elevate the horse's head, actually, and soften the jaw. That's the reason that the British invented the snaffle bit. And actually we can sort of trace back when that happened, because if you look at the way the vaqueros and the conquistadors trained their horses when they came to the Americas, they hadn't invented the snaffle bit yet. So they went straight from a hackamore or a halter into a leverage bit, you know, something with shanks, so that they could frame their horse's head. And they would ride in the two rein as a intermediary step. So they'd ride with a halter on and reins, and with the leverage bit and reins, and they'd use two sets of reins at the same time. So for that, you'd use something like a bosalito, which is this, and you can see how this is a lot thinner, Ito in Spanish means small, so this is a kind of a pencil style hackamore with horsehair reins. And the reason that you might want to have horsehair reins is they feel that they feel the neck rein cue a little bit more. So you'd use a set of Machates like this, and then hook a set of Romal rawhide reins. And you see these have chains, and you'd hook all that up to a spade bit. Now I don't have this hanging on a headstall because I just don't have a use for it right now, but this would be a spade bit. So you see it has a roller in the middle, and this would be about like the most ridiculous leverage bit you have ever seen, but this one's actually for communication. So let's break that down a little bit. So what you see, how the horse's tongue lays underneath this mouthpiece here, and so he can roll this cricket, and these bars right here can actually speak to his tongue, or his tongue can manipulate these bars to send feelings down the reins. So just from a little shift of the hand, he feels the change in the mouthpiece, and so this is much more of a communication. This is telegraphing the weight of this bit. It's not actually you never pull the slack out of the reins on a spade bit like this. But if you see, as this shank gets pulled, and if it's hanging by this, as this shank gets pulled, you can see how where it hinges from is actually right up here by this plate. So this whole bar draws into the bottom of the horse's mouth and helps to kind of create that headset. That's if you were to pull it. So but as a communication bit, it's just they feel the weight change. So this would be the end all be all finished. You know, you would never want to pull on your horse. Bigger bits are not for pulling more, they're for pulling less. Snaffle bit, so you can see a big difference here. The snaffle bit was invented by the English as an intermediary step, and it actually is probably the single most impactful innovation in the horse world in terms of bidding. I think, you know, to date, probably. I mean, the snaffle is the basis for many bits. And so this one is called a loose ring snaffle because you see how the mouthpiece just slides loosely around these rings. You could go for like a connected D snaffle. So you see how this makes a little bit more of a D shape, and it's actually connected. It doesn't slide up and down on the mouthpiece or around the ring. And so this one would be just for a horse that's a little further along, could create a little bit of a headset without using leverage. But really, I mean, you know, and this one's the same idea. It's just a ring instead of a D, but it's connected. Really, it doesn't matter. Any of these bits are pretty much all the same. Doesn't really matter all that much. If you look in here though, you can see there's copper inlays in the mouthpiece of the bit, and this is, I think, sweet iron. So that's all to stimulate salivation. And so all of the bits that I have hanging here, you know, they have inlays and they're really nice. All these, I have a whole bunch of other snaffle bits right here, but you can see the reason they're kind of in dry storage is they're all sort of made out of nickel, except for this one's got copper and iron, but it's got, you see these, the connections here, they're actually, they kind of have a loose hole there, so they pinch the horse's cheeks, their commissures of their mouth there quite a bit. And so that's why this one, these are all kind of the dry storage bits, because they're not as tasty to the horses. Bodie's rounding up a cow. So progression again. hackamore, halter to the snaffle bit. Snaffle is for gaining control of the left, right, and being able to lift the head to shift the weight onto the back feet. Then you would want to go to some sort of a transition phase after the snaffle. A lot of people like to go back into the hackamore, create more softness, more suppleness, and really get your horse, responsive and light and soft. Then they would move on and take their horse into the 2-rein and introduce them to a leverage bit that way. The other way you could do it is with a transition bit, something that's not too sorry, I thought I heard a car. So the other way you could do it is by going to a transition bit instead of the 2-rein. And so typically people would use like a Tom Thumb style transition bit. And you can see this one's not too bad. It has a separate chin strap area, but it has a snaffle mouthpiece, so that would be kind of familiar to the horse. And used one at a time, it can work a little bit, but it's really not. The snaffle mouthpiece was not designed to be used for leverage. So if you were to, somehow these were to pull back or together, it can act like a nutcracker on the horse's bars, on their gums, and that can cause some serious damage. And actually, usually what happens if your horse is just transferring from the snaffle to like a Tom Thumb or to a transition bit, they're not used to getting that head tuck and all that extra pressure anyway, especially and your hands aren't used to moving slower than they need to. So you tend to see horses created as head tossers when you use this bit. Conversely, this is kind of the same idea as that Tom Thumb, but it has this barrel in the middle, so it stops that nutcracker action from taking place. It's actually curved. The mouthpiece is curved, so it works into the gums just a little, it works like those shoulders on the spade bit. So you see these big shoulders that move back and forth right here? Well, these tiny ones right here work the same way. So you can see how that would start that little progression process. Then after you worked in a transition bit for a little bit, something nice, then you'd want to switch into a little bit more. This would be like a real bridle kind of a thing. See, it's got a little bit of a ported mouthpiece here, the same barrel in the middle, but it's got about 3 inches or so down here and about 1 inch up here. So this is a 3-to-1 bitting ratio, which means if you pull with 1 ounce here, your horse feels 3 ounces in the mouthpiece. That's why big bits are not for pulling more, they're for pulling less, because it takes a lot less effort to send that same communication down to the horse. And in fact, the more you use a bridle like this, the more you want to try to be using slack in your reins consistently. So then if your horse progresses beyond that point, you can go from a 3-to-1 bitting ratio to a 5-to-1. Even more communication, little steeper shoulders there, or elbows, whatever you call those. And but you see how this chin strap is in the same hole that the headstall hangs on? There was a horseman named Monty Foreman who noticed that caused some pinching in horses, especially if you use chains. That's why you'll notice that on any of my bits, I like to use a leather chin strap. People have different things they can say about that, but it's you can make it just as uncomfortable if you want to. You don't need to strap a chain onto a bony part of their body to yank on. So you see how this is not anymore an independent action bit. like the others. Right here, this is an independent action. Either side can move independent of the other. This one's a solid mouthpiece bit. Still has a port, so that gives tongue relief to your horse. But if you look at the chin strap here, it's offset from where you hang the bridle. And that prevents pinching in your horse's mouth. And it actually it creates a little bit more of a comfortable space for your horse's chin to go. And then this bit also, it's a 3-to-1 bitting ratio, but you see there's a strap and there's 2 loops. So this is actually a transition bit all in itself, because it has a snaffle ring and a leverage ring. And that's how it's designed to be used, is with that converter strap in the middle. Then then it gives you that direct control with the tucking power of the leverage bit, and that would be another way to kind of transition your horse in. Even though it doesn't have independent action, it works in a slightly different way. So let's recap that process again. You go from your halter to your snaffle, back to the hackamore, into the 2-rein or a transition bridle, and then you finish off straight up in the bridle in whatever your horse works best in, whatever fits best for their headset, for the way their body works. I mean, so you see the way these snaffle or these spade bits were designed is they're actually designed to find an individual horse, because see how this one balances. The arms just kind of sit straight up and down, and the mouthpiece sits straight up and down. So this is for a horse that fairly naturally keeps himself on a vertical frame. Other horses tend to stick their nose out a little bit more, so they'd be designed to balance a little bit further out this way, say. Other horses, they're very tucky, so they do pretty well with this. But that's so you want to get, if you're going to finish off straight up in the bridle and really want to do this communication thing with your horse, you get to this point, you want to custom fit the bit to your horse. That's a lot of work, though. Honestly, if you stayed in the snaffle, or if you stayed in whatever bit that you kind of felt good with your horse in, and you tuned up in the 2-rein, that'd be a good way of going about things. Oh, one other thing to mention about the leverage bits is, so you got your 3-to-1 bitting ratio, a 5-to-1 bitting ratio. You can even have more. But the thing about the leverage ratio is, the shorter your shanks are on your bit, the faster the mouthpiece tends to move. So if you have a horse that's intimidated by a bit, sometimes more leverage can help slow it down so that it gives your horse time to react. However, so you can see how that would be a little bit of a tenuous line to balance on, though, because with a young horse, you really want to have very low leverage to start off. But if they're nervous about the bit, you want as much leverage as you can get to keep the mouthpiece slow. So anyway, one more time, the progression, just to make sure I got it all and you get it all. Halter, Hakima, snaffle bit, transition bit, 2-rein, straight up in the bridle. That's the progression. Now you know a little bit more about bits, and I hope you found this helpful.